Good evening. First, I'd like to thank you for this invitation to speak at what many refer to as a pivotal time or an unprecedented time in our country and in Washington State, where the rule of law and our meaning of what that means is challenged. Women, my sisters in the struggle. We have always historically been intimately involved in major human rights movements addressing the elimination of systemic, structural, and many similar types of barriers. Yet history has frequently been silent in a number of ways, but silent on our contributions, our accomplishments, and our diverse stories. The silence has allowed others to define and control who we are as women and how we are seen. The silence has allowed others to control hard-fought protections for women, and in some circumstances, changed the narrative of our story. Allowing the silencing to go unaddressed will place women in subservient positions, and if not adequately addressed, it may literally place us in servitude. Women, we've been there, and we've done that. Synonymous with servitude is inequality. Western European culture has tied who we are as women to institutional systems with associated systemic barriers. Gender and inequality, race and inequality, sexual orientation and inequality, immigration and inequality, disability and inequality, descriptors that preordain lives to one of servitude, oppression, and powerlessness. I was raised to be strong, and I was raised by strong, independent women. My mother, a college graduate, aunts who were of different races, ethnicities, religions. Some were breadwinners of the family units. Older female cousins were lawyers and one a judge. Others were teachers who valued me and my input. Essentially, I was surrounded by women who not only thought that I mattered, but ensured that I knew that I mattered and that I was worthy. All of these women instilled in me a sense of belonging, the strength to stand up, stand out, and stand fast in my pursuit of my goals that I set for myself. I understood that my gender is never an impediment to my success, but that it is and always has been and should be an asset. I was to stand strong, to be seen and treated as equal. However, after arriving in the United States at the age of 16, I encountered behaviors that I had not encountered before. My sense of self-worth was challenged daily, and the very essence of who I was and what I was supposed to be and what I was capable of was continuously being marginalized. I wondered how I was supposed to fit in when I was raised to stand out. How do I counter these messages that said that I was to know my place as it was not to be in the workplace? And if my place was to be in the workplace, I was not to replace a man, but rather to support him. The message sent was I was not to be assertive or ambitious. I was to dim my light. Here I was, a young woman in New York City. It was the 80s, and it was an exciting time. One of my favorite singers was the Australian singer Helen, and her song, I Am Woman, was my mantra. It was the lens through which I saw womanhood, even to today. Her lyrics spoke to me during the formative time as a woman and continues to anchor my sense of worth as a woman even today, so indulge me. I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore. And I know too much to go back and pretend, because I've heard it all before and I've been down there on the floor, and no one's gonna keep me down again. Oh, she goes on. I am wise, but it's wisdom born of pain. And I think this is what we need to hear again, especially now. Yes, I've paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can do anything. I am strong. I am invincible. I am woman. You can bend but never break me, because it only serves to make me more determined to achieve my final goal. And I come back even stronger, not a novice any longer, because you've deepened the conviction in my soul. I am woman, watch me roar, watch me grow. See me standing toe to toe as I spread my loving arms across the land. But I'm still an embryo with a long, long way to go until I make who? My brother understand. My arrival in the 1980s was preceded less than 10 years prior by the issuance of a landmark case that provided women in the United States with a constitutional right to abortion. The case was Roe v. Wade. And even though I had no idea of what an abortion was or the significance of it, the energy at the time let me know that it was a huge accomplishment in women's health, and that was a good thing. There was an undeniable sense of pride. The first woman was appointed to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. I learned about that court and that decisions made there impacted our lives in significant ways. It was a time when a woman, Geraldine Ferraro, ran for vice president. And I learned that there was another woman with Caribbean parents like me who ran for president prior, and her name was Shirley Chisholm. I was in a new country, coming into my womanhood. I was a sponge. So today I ask myself, what happened? What happened in the women's movement? What happened to women's work for equality? Attending law school, I learned that one fundamental legal principle in the law of civilized nations is that everyone must be treated equally, without special privileges, discrimination, and bias. To this day, I struggled with the concept of equality, as there are flaws in its implementation. The concept in theory works if everyone starts from the same place, but that is not the historical narrative of women in the United States and around the world. Women's movements have pursued equality as an end place, and equality is not the end. Rather, it is a continuous pursuit that is interwoven with fairness and neutrality in its application. Even where we promulgate equity in policies and procedures to engender inclusion in its application, the problem of attaining equality has not been achieved. It continues to exist, and to the perception of some, continues to get worse. Is it possible that equality is not what women want and not what has been requested over the years? The English language is an interesting dialect, as one word has different meaning depending on the context within which it is used. A review of how the word equal has been used by historical icons, I think, is insightful. Many historical figures, men and women, have used the term equal or equality many times in diametrically opposed ways. 250 years ago, in 1776, Thomas Jefferson, in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Women were excluded from this creation, even though there can be no creation without a woman. In 1946, Mahatma Gandhi published in his newspaper the following quote: "The real meaning of economic equality is to each according to his need." Gandhi appeared to understand that we are unequal to start. In other words, equality is synonymous with equity, and you are entitled to your fair share, which is based on your particular need. 1964, Nelson Mandela, in one of his historic speeches, said, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Mandela saw equality as a means to gain equal access. He believed if provided, that all persons would live freely and harmoniously democratically. 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "I look forward to the day when all who work for a living will be one. This will be the day when we bring into full realization the American dream, a dream yet unfilled, a dream of equality and of opportunity." Dr. King saw equality as a national imperative. 1974, yes, I'm going through the men. 1974, Justice Thurgood Marshall, who as an attorney spent much of his legal career fighting for equality in education, amongst other things, after joining the Supreme Court, authored a dissenting opinion where he said, "We deal here with the right of all of our children, whatever their race, to an equal start in life and to an equal opportunity to reach their full potential as citizens." Justice Marshall advocated for racial equality through an equality lens that to this day, as a society, we still grapple with. The issue of how are we to address the premise of the problem of trying to make something equal when there are numerous inequalities in the start of each life. In 1973, a trailblazing woman for women's rights argued before the US Supreme Court against systemic discrimination while demanding that women be permitted to stand upright on an equal footing as her male counterparts. In her argument to the court, she updated a phrase originally written in 1838 by 19th century abolitionist and women's rights pioneer, Sarah Grimke. This trailblazer said, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." She became Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ms. Grimke and Justice Ginsburg were arguing not for equal treatment as many believe. More importantly, they were asking for equal access to opportunities, the same opportunities their brethren enjoyed. The difference is access allows you to perform within your capabilities. It is merit-based. Equal treatment does not consider your individual capabilities, and you may get less than you need or more than you need. It creates vile rhetoric and discourse because someone feels like they're unjustly required to give up something in order to share. It is interesting to note that even with the significant work accomplishments of these icons in the pursuit of equality around gender, race, socioeconomic, education, etc., equality is yet to be fully realized. Equality is not meant to be a solution. It is meant to be a means by which equal access is achieved. What is being asked for, as Sarah Grimke and Justice Ginsburg articulated, is for women to be afforded the opportunity to produce, to contribute within their own capabilities in the pursuit of the unalienable rights that all humans are endowed with: life, liberty, and happiness. What women want is in essence not equality. What women want and have always wanted is just treatment. That is, to be treated justly. Just treatment is a human rights concept that includes the maxim of acceptance and respect. It entails understanding that everyone is unique as we recognize and value our individual differences. When a request for just treatment is made, it is never for special treatment. The request is to be respected, valued, and meaningfully included. The problem we grapple with is the same problem of Sarah Grimke's time. The form is different, but the substance is the same. My point is that today we continue to grapple with just treatment, a notion that allows all of us as a people, as a nation of immigrants, to live up to our full potential. Just treatment is a notion that allows all people to live with dignity and respect, free from fear and violence, and protected against discrimination. The outcry of unjust treatment is the outcry of all of us. Democracy means the recognition of the rights of others. Until we see the similarities between women's pursuit for equality as connected to and included within the problem of other movements in pursuit of elusive equality, the problem of solving inequities can never sustainably be solved. A movement for equality acknowledges that we all start from different places, and to achieve a just result requires collaboration with other similarly situated movements, as equality is a collaborative concept that encompasses all. Recently, within the last few years, I've heard statements made that we are living in unprecedented or extraordinary times. I don't believe we are. The problems we encounter today are not new. I don't believe they are the same problems. The problems we encountered are not new, they are the same problems, sorry. We just have not been able to solve them on a systemic, structural, and sustainable level. I bring to the work I do as a Supreme Court Justice what I call my diverse, personal and professional intersecting lens. And when I joined the court in 2020, within 2 weeks of my appointment, May 25th, 2020, many people saw in 8 minutes and 46 seconds the killing of a man named George Floyd. And it was done by a law enforcement officer. Many discussions came from what was seen. At the time, I kept thinking about Sarah Grimke's words, the words adapted and repeated 135 years later by Justice Ginsburg in her pursuit of just treatment for women. I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our neck. I thought, what occurred be such a shock to our consciousness if similarities between the request for just treatment was equally applied to all people? The feet on the neck symbolizes dehumanizing treatment. And there's never anything just about how it is applied. Dear League of Women Voters, your ask is not for favor. Your ask is that your brethren take their feet off your necks. Right. There is no going back. That ship has sailed. But if you dare to forget, let me remind you of what that looks like. Pretext to delay advances women have made so that barefoot and pregnant may be a thing again. Delegating women to their place at home or in the kitchen. Please understand that a woman has the choice to decide where her place is, to include her choice to be in a decision-making seat. Silencing, so a woman's 15th and 19th Amendment right is hindered. Accepting treatment as a second-class citizen. Removing the history of the advancements made by women resulting in a single narrative. Creating laws and rules as if women are to help. Redefining her accomplishments as that of a man's, or assessing a woman's worth as connected to her genitalia. The aim has always been to have us know our place, to divide us, to instill fear, and to silence our voices. Because if one voice is allowed to be silenced, it will lead to many more voices being silenced. It will be just a matter of time before the voice silenced is yours. Today, many women have lost their voice, and they are finding visibility difficult. But that is why it is important to support women, as yes, women have fought hard for the wins obtained, but the battle is not over. And unfortunately, many are comfortable and complacent now with having obtained a seat. Women, this is an exciting time to pay attention to what is occurring on your state courts. It is time to recognize the power of our collective presence. Sisterhood is inclusive of all women. It is global, and it is powerful and knows no boundaries. So how do you leverage this power to effectuate sustainable change? Simple. Reformulate the approach in pursuit of equality. The approach needs new life. Pursuing equality has failed to account for the reality of the problem. The problem of what a woman in Eastern Washington may need is not necessarily what a similarly situated woman in Western Washington needs. The approach of trying to make them equal instead of creating unity in a course, a sense of community, instead fostered an ideology of individualism. Women, we became strangers to each other, gravitating to superficial similarities instead of exploring and valuing our differences. We did, with ourselves and with our allies, just that. Distrust and apathy replaced trust and empathy, resulting in dislike and manifestations of bias, and in some extreme cases, pure hatred, because we no longer socially interacted with each other. Our connections with each other were weakened, and the infrastructure of the many movements of the 60s in pursuit of a common belief in justice for all became justice for a few. The pursuit of equality arguably left the people behind in We the People. A while ago, I was reading an article, and if I did not read that the author was discussing their observations of what was occurring in the 1960s, I would have thought they were talking about what was occurring today. Communities then, like communities today, were described as reeling under the slippery slope of poverty. Homelessness is rampant. The issue of redistricting that appeared to be synonymous with redlining, an increase in business closures, displacement of many people, some losing their homes and jobs for the first time in their lives. Drug addiction, then a their problem, is now a we problem that has crossed generational and socioeconomic lines. Crime continues to be constant, and incarceration has not been a panacea as first thought. Sustainably eliminating police misconduct continues to be a work in progress. There's still the daily impact of environmental degradation, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods, and the gap between the rich and the poor is wider than ever and continues to grow. Women, we must regroup and reformulate the approach. Learn from past efforts, because to improve the future does not require a complete annihilation of the past. But it is said, and I agree, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Stop the insanity. Many programs and what were thought to be permanent solutions in the 60s have been eroded, if not completely dismantled. For the people of Washington State, we must continue to design new social, legal, and political tools and vehicles to move from deprivation, depression, and despair to opportunity, hope, and ambition. But we can reformulate the approach, the programs, and the possible solutions for the current times and focus on the state level. As you reformulate, continue to create respectful rules of engagement. Differences should be explored, but hateful discourse and behavior should continue to have no place in our work. Well, just as it has no place in civilized society. The level of intolerance observed daily is not new and should not be acceptable. It should not be that for some voices to be heard, other voices need to be silenced. Women, you should understand that silence of any kind permits exclusion. Silence allows others to define and control the narrative. It allows the story to be told without required input. In the reformulation work hard to ensure that such an environment does not become our new normal, because all of the people of this state matter, even those you disagree with often. As you reformulate your plans, aspire to unite as you address interrelated and sometimes distinctly different issues. Encourage the view that our differences are a strength that brings us together and not a problem that should separate us. Be Americans first, whether born here or brought here through migration. Eliminate the irrationalities that foster discriminatory and unjust treatment that blinds us from seeing the value and worth in each other. As you work in collaboration with others, remember, agreement is not required, but respect is. As it is unlikely that we will agree on everything, but again, that is not required. As you reformulate, start by hearing the voice of the other, so that echo chamber does not continue to exist, the one that prohibits growth and understanding. Engage with the other. Try to understand and be responsive to what is being said. Reformulating your approach requires acknowledging and understanding that, again, when one voice is silenced, it can lead to many more voices being silenced. It is just a matter of time before the one silenced is you. Today, many communities have lost their voice, and they're finding visibility difficult. A reformulated approach must include dedicated collaborative efforts to create safe spaces for the needed dialogue and actions, as their voice must continue to matter. So include them in your solutions. The words "we the people," when written, did not mean all the people. It did not mean us, women. So please ensure that it does have an inclusive meaning in your reformulated approach. Always remember to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, as they need the most protection. The rest will be adequately covered with such an approach. Basic humanity should bind us together, where we see, hear, feel, and care for each other. In 1966, during a lecture, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "One of the great misfortunes of history is that all too many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change and yet fail to achieve the new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution, and there can be no gainsaying about the fact that a social revolution is taking place in our world today. The great question," he said, is, what do we do when we find ourselves in such a period? Well, here's what I intend to do. The decision made in state courts have an immediate impact on your daily lives. Everything from traffic tickets, civil lawsuits, and damage claims, marriages, divorces, juvenile and adult criminal offenses, to state constitutionality matters. Most important is that the Washington State Supreme Court has the final and absolute say on interpreting the Washington State Constitution. Federal courts usually lack the authority to review or overturn a state court's interpretation of state law. A state constitution can grant its citizens more rights and protections than the federal government. It just cannot grant fewer rights. Therefore, who and how the Washington State Constitution, who interprets it and how it is interpreted matters more this year than ever before. The reason is there is an unprecedented 5 positions open on the Washington State Supreme Court. That's a majority. I have 2 colleagues present from the court system. One is a trial level court judge, Judge Jamie Hawk, and the other is a Washington Supreme Court Justice, Colleen Melody. The reason I share that is when I joined the court, I became the 6th woman on the court then, joining 5 other women. It was said at that time that the court became the most diverse Supreme Court in the nation, as it consisted of not just justices with personal differences, but also different professional backgrounds. The present makeup of this court is 5 women, and if nothing changes in November, we will have 4. But women voters of Washington State, you have a chance to continue to have a bench of exceptionally well-qualified jurists, and there are many trying to sit with us on our bench. But there's a legacy of women, of prior female Supreme Court justices on the Washington State Supreme Court, and you should be proud of that, because not many states have that many. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, "It would be a travesty to the population served if their justice is reflected only in terms of the white male experience, because experience matters, both in informing the court's opinions and in ensuring that the population feels like it is part of the process and not like an outsider looking in. The law has always been gender and race sensitive to one group," she said, white men. So this year, I ask that you pay attention to the court races in Washington State, because those races matter, because those races impact your lives on a daily basis. You have that opportunity on the state's highest court, the court that can protect you on a constitutional level in interpreting Washington's Constitution. Pay attention to who's on the ballot. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer them. Another reason I brought my colleagues, Judge Hawk and Justice Melody, is they are sitting judges at this time, and they can also provide their perspective if you'd like to hear from them on that as well, from the trial level where I practice, and then now at the Supreme Court where Justice Melody and I practice.
Hello, I'm Susan Daniel from Kitsap County, actually Port Orchard, great city of Port Orchard.
And we were just in your neck of the woods,
Oh, you
traveling
were?
court, yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, great, thank you. I really appreciate the words that you gave us and shared with us today. I'm a retired attorney, and in looking at the ballot, I go, how can I tell? And so do you have some words of wisdom for us on what are some questions we could ask to determine the qualities of the person who's on the ballot and whether or not these would be people that we would want to sit in judgment of us? Thank you.
That's a great question, and a great question at this point in time. You do want to, first and foremost, talk to other attorneys. We're all attorneys, because our reputation is what matters, right? You want to look at the individual's history. You don't have to have been a judge to be a judge, right? But you have to look at the work that was done prior to seeking whatever office, and you will find a wide array of experiences. Look at where they're from. I like a balanced bench, to be perfectly honest. I was approached by the governor in regards to one of his picks most recently, and he asked, well, what do you want on the bench? And I looked at my bench and I said, I'd like someone from Eastern Washington, because at that point in time, we did not have anyone. And I think we need to have that perspective at the table. We do not want an echo chamber. Washington is all of Washington, not just Western Washington, right? I wanted that to be someone seated with me. I don't necessarily want someone with the same experience as myself. You want to look at what is it they're going to be adding to what's already there, because you want as many voices, as many perspectives to be accountable to the people of Washington. We are each individually elected officials, and we bring different things to the bench. So I think that is truly important. Ask, read the pamphlet, go to the voters, what do you call it, those forums, right? Where you're asking questions, and hold them accountable. I think you will find many of the individuals in many of these races are exceptionally well qualified. And you will also find some are not. You don't want to be casting your vote for those that are not. Look and see if you have a particular judge or justice that you appreciate. Look and see who they're endorsing and who they're not. Also, and here's something, just because someone is seated on your bench and they're endorsing you, don't be fooled. It might be the comfortable thing to do. So look beyond that and look at why this person, after checking everything else, is worthy of being there. And then make your decision, because it's your life that's going to be impacted. Experience matters, right? But it doesn't matter all the time, because I'll give you a nice example, and then I'll shut up and see if my colleagues have. But some people make the decision based on how long somebody's been doing something. And if you listen to what I just said, that's the wrong thing to do, because not everybody is starting from the same place. So if as women we were waiting our turn to be seen as equal, we would be behind and we would not be on the bench. I've lectured many times, and I said that approach to hiring someone is absolutely erroneous. I'm picking the candidate if they're equally qualified and exceptionally well qualified. I'm picking the candidate that got there in less time. I see I'm in a room with very bright women. You read through that one. And the reason is that individual did a lot of work to get there to be deemed equal. They didn't start at the same place as the other person. So that's the exceptionally well-qualified individual.
Thank you. My name is Robbie, and I'm from Kittitas County, and it is very red in that part of the state. I am wondering if you have any advice for those of us who are in an organization, whether at work or a not-for-profit and volunteering, in changing an organization from the inside out. And you look in this room and you see the women here, but do you see diversity? And how should we best approach that?
Well, I do look around this room and I see the women, and I see a lot of diversity. Because diversity is not just race, it's not just gender. I see age diversity, I see color diversity, I see professional background diversity. I have two individuals here with different experiences, exceptionally well qualified diversity. So we have to understand that diversity, for me, never means less than. It means more worthy, better than, as good as, at a minimum. That's what diversity means to me, because it means you're bringing something different to the table that wasn't there before. And that's why I say pay attention to what they're bringing to the table. You don't want the same old. Creates an echo chamber where many are left out. But in regards to your question in dealing with differences, which I think is the underlying premise, I was a Board of Industrial Insurance Appeals judge. I'm from a Caribbean island, Trinidad and Tobago, way down south, 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And when I worked for the board, my run, where I went to court, was Eastern Washington. So I drove to Okanagan County, right? Winthrop, Moses Lake. I was just out on the road on that side of the world. And I had friends in Western Washington would say, how's that working for you? And I said, at first I didn't get it, but then when I finally figured out what they were alluding to, I said, oh, it's like going home. And they said, what? I said, I live on an island. Everybody gets along with everybody. I play stupid if somebody's trying to be, have nefariousness in them or something. So I said, for me, it's like going home. I'm going to a different place. It's like I lived on Island County. I worked as a prosecutor in Island County. It's a different place. But once you are in a place with people who are so divergently different, maybe in your value system or your ideology, and this is something I used during my legal career, because I did both prosecution and public defense work and private defense work. I represented individuals who used the N-word. And I easily, when I was a public defender, I took the case, and of course I could have asked to get off of it. But I was like, first of all, shocked. Second, I took it as an opportunity to use myself to prove this person wrong. And they may not think of it right away, but when I was finished saving them somehow, they'll always remember the Black woman that did. So it's not to run away from the problem, it's to engage the problem. And that's why I say we need to listen. Many things that people are concerned about today, right? The unraveling of things that made you comfortable is because you created an echo chamber that left out what was occurring. And when it did actually happen, it shocked you to the core. Don't let that happen again. Be at that uncomfortable table so you know what is occurring, because it affects you.
Be at that uncomfortable table. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add to that. I was before I became a judge, I was
Who are you?
I'm Colleen Melody. I was a civil rights lawyer for the state, and so I traveled all around, from the Palouse to the Peninsula doing civil rights cases. And people think of civil rights as like sort of politicized or something that only Western Washington wants. But when I talk to people at just their personal level, everybody wants that. Right? Everybody wants to be treated fairly. Nobody wants, and you might talk about the rights differently. You might be talking about disability rights or age discrimination or other things depending on who you're talking to. But I found that at that individual level, you can always make a connection because everybody really wants the same thing, which is like a fair shot and to be heard. And that's true in Kittitas County. I've spent a lot of time there. So I know you're doing that. I know you know that. Yeah.
Judge Hawk, you're a trial level court judge, and you see a lot of diversity come before the bench. What would people in Washington State need to pay attention to when it comes to those trial level court type of situations, especially from a voting perspective?
Thank you, Justice Whitener, for that question. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jamie Hawk. And to your question, I think it's it is very difficult to know who to vote for, and judicial races are really challenging. And I think to the extent, as Justice Whitener was encouraging you to look at the track records of the candidates, and I know that's really hard because often you just get the voter's guide and you just have some broad brushstrokes, and you only see what they're presenting to you about their background. And often there's a lot more, and there's only 300 words, I think, per page. And so to the extent, and I know it's hard because you often don't have access to the candidates, but to the extent you can ask other judges or lawyers, or if you have access to the candidates, you can ask them about their track records. Where have they worked and for how long? What were the types of cases that they were handling? Who were they representing? Those are all really important questions. It will give you definitely a fuller picture of how they've spent their time, what interests they were representing, and their values, right? And lawyers make a lot of decisions, as you know, in terms of where they work and the types of cases that they handle.
Another thing just came to mind, thank you, Judge, as Judge Hawk was speaking. A lot of individuals who are running for various courts right now are actually practicing judges, justices. Go sit in a courtroom, go observe, right? Don't let us tell you what to do. Go check it out yourself. See how they treat people, because you'd be surprised sometimes.
Thank you. Ann Murphy, I'm from Clark County, but a lot of time in Eastern Washington, so thank you for doing that. One of the websites I think we've seen in the past is Voting for Judges that does, and just wonder what your opinion is of that effort.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was started by Justice Wiggins. It was started by a judge or justice, and it was to give voters, because judicial races, unfortunately, we're at the end of the voters pamphlet.
End of the ballot and nobody
Yeah,
knows who you are.
Exactly. And by then, you're just fatigued. You just start ticking off. But that's why that was put there. And I believe it's still being monitored by either attorneys or judges. And that retired, of course. And that's a great place to look.
That's what I've always thought, so thank you for verifying that.
And would you repeat?
I think it's called Voting for Judges, isn't that the name? Voting for,
Yes, voting for
and
judges.
I've gone to it before many times.
Oh, I've been told it hasn't been updated because unfortunately, I do think it was Justice Wiggins, and he is passed.
Oh,
So it may not be.
so maybe we can't use it this year. So anyway, it was a good source.
That's a good, yeah. We have some recently retired judges and justices. Maybe we should nudge them to start looking at that.
There's a new website that's up this year that's called Washington Supreme Court Elections Visualizer, and it has pictures of every race, and you can kind of click through. And I think it's the Northwest Progressive Institute that's sort of putting most of the money into that. But it's a really fair, balanced, I mean, it's a straight up, description, and I've been impressed by it.
Say it again. Say it again. Thank you.
Yeah, Washington Supreme Court Elections Visualizer.
And you said it was NPI, right?
Yeah, I think they're in collaboration with folks, but they took the lead, I think in part because the resource that you mentioned was valuable and is no longer being updated.
Justice Whitener, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to meet you and talk to you and ask you questions. Yeah. I'm Joanne Lasowski from Tacoma Pierce County League, and as a Tacoma Pierce County, as a former university professor, I'm very concerned about the attack on higher education, and I'm wondering what we can do. I spoke to Judge Hawks about this earlier. What can we do to protect higher education in this state?
Be involved with the schools. I mean, be involved with the schools so you know what is going on. They have different boards. They have councils that are electable positions, get involved. And then you can also, because many of you are retired, is what I'm hearing, you can go back and get involved with the students. I taught street law when I was a trial level court judge I was on that bench for 5 years, and I taught street law for 4.5 of those years. And I literally went into Lincoln High School. I chose Lincoln High School to connect with high schoolers who were about to graduate. And one of the things I wanted them to get from my class was they were not limited, right? You can do whatever you want to do, because this was an impoverished neighborhood, disadvantaged students. I never bought into that for them. They would get up real early in the morning to get to class for 8 o'clock class with me. Some of them had to take 2-3 buses, didn't have meals in the morning, because I needed to stay grounded to know what they were experiencing, right? So people see us as sitting on the benches being removed, but we continue to be actively involved in what we can in our neighborhoods. But on that one too, before I end, one of the things we decided to do, the teacher was Miss Hamilton, Elena Hamilton, and I did towards the end of my tenure teaching at Lincoln High School, was to make sure those high schoolers understood the value of their vote. So we made sure they got registered to vote before walking out that door. It was one thing we really thought was a wonderful thing to do for them, giving them that voice and having them understand what that meant. Yeah. So get involved.
Oh, first I have a statement. What you said about going to someone's court and watching what they do, it really resonated with me because I was a juror in one of your cases.
Oh.
And I'm Tacoma Pierce County, Teresa's my name. And I want to say that I went home that night and I told my husband, this is the first time a judge has ever taken the time to really talk with the jury about what our job is and how important it is, and treat us with as much respect. It felt like I was doing something important. And I've been on other trials and never had someone spend that kind of time with us. So I just want to say, I'm being a sap, but I want to say thank you.
I don't cry easily, but I'm
Hello, Justice Whitener. I think we're probably going to bring this to a close, but you've spoken about, as we are selecting who we would like to vote for, to look at experience. I'm wondering if you'd also talk about maybe qualities beyond experience that we might be looking towards. I mean, as I think about a Supreme Court justice, I want to know the kinds of ways of approaching thinking and problems that we maybe should be looking out for beyond experience.
Well, experience matters. And when I say experience, it incorporates what you're talking about. But you have to also be careful with that, because not everyone who is running for a particular seat, judicial seat, has a track record on that bench, right? The Washington Supreme Court is rather unique in that you can just literally have raised your hand, taken the oath as an attorney, and I know this from experience because it happened to me when I got to this court. Literally take the oath and run for the Supreme Court. My first time on the bench, got appointed, and you have to run immediately in the next election. My opponent had literally taken his oath about a week prior to filing against me. He had been to law school. He never practiced law. He became a teacher. That's where we kind of bonded. At the end of the day, we ended up just bonding over his teaching, and my parents were teachers and stuff. And at one of the debates, I now get sidetracked, on one of the debates after I was finished speaking, he said, I just want to be like Justice Whitener. And I was like, oh, I think I just got you. But because he was just so enamored by the fact that I still try to be involved with the community, right? So be careful about trying to know too much about their experience in or on the bench, because you don't necessarily have to have it. So that's why you look at what is it they have done professionally. But I also say sometimes they have to tell you what they've done personally. So there are different associations that they may have participated in. You want to know about that. That's where when you do the forums and you ask those questions. We were a traveling court, and a gentleman asked a question that I thought was kind of slick, really. He wanted to know what was the last book you read and what periodicals you subscribed to. And I chuckled because I thought, yeah, he is looking beyond the credentials. He is trying to get a feel for who we as justices were. We were in Port Angeles for traveling court. The court goes out to the community each term. We pick a location. We'll be in Colville next term. Yes, so we do travel around the state. But look at those things. You really want to know this person. That's why ask friends, ask lawyers. Lawyers can tell you the background story on someone that you may not get from their ratings, because, we put forward the best when it comes to ratings, and we have a short interview session with other attorneys. But they check, and they check your reputation amongst others. People observe your performance. Look and see if they got involved in things that you want to know they got involved in. I just told you, I taught at Lincoln High School. Did I have to? No. Is it something I was using for a campaign thing? No. It was just something I enjoyed doing. My parents were teachers, and I was told my presentation style was that of a teacher when I did trials. And I love trying to figure out kids and where their head is at. I wanted to stay grounded. Those are the types of things, if I was asked, I will tell you, but if I didn't, you wouldn't know. So ask the questions. But it's not about what people tell you necessarily in their voters' pamphlet. Read between the lines. Did they take the time to answer something in the voters' pamphlet? How many times have you seen it where there isn't even a picture? Right. They haven't taken the time to take a picture. Ask yourself why. They haven't told you where it says experience, that they have none, or they have tried to word it a different way. We're intelligent people. Read between the lines, because this year is like no other when it comes to our courts. It really is. And the Supreme Court, honestly, it's very unlikely we will have another situation where 5 justices, to include the Chief Justice, Deborah Stevens, who is the longest sitting justice right now on our bench, because so much intellectual property has left and will be leaving. Justice Johnson has had over 30 some odd years. He's the longest sitting justice. He's aging out at 75. We cannot work beyond 75. Barbara Mattson, Justice Mattson, the first woman to run and win an election for the Supreme Court. She has retired, 30 some odd years on the bench. That's a lot of intellectual property, right? And then ask yourself, why is someone running for a seat against a sitting justice when the justice has only done what they were supposed to be doing? Ask the question.
Please, yes, you have been so generous with your time and your experience, and it is just, I think we're very honored to have you with us tonight. So I want to thank you so very much for being, and I think you'll stay a bit, so you may have other questions. She wants a picture. There we go. And I want to give you something, and I know you probably can't accept gifts, but we love to do this. The League of Women Voters publishes textbooks on civic education. And this is both of our sets of books, 3rd through 5th grade and for 7th and 8th graders. We'd love to give you a set.
Thank you so much.
To let you know we are doing that work. And I think there's cookies under here. These are homemade, so I'm going to give you some cookies. I know. And those are for her. No one else can have those cookies. I just want to say, to be shared. Thank you for your extraordinary generosity and for joining us tonight.